Please be seated. That hymn is maybe unfamiliar to many of you. That's a Welsh hymn that had both the words in Welsh and the words in English, and we chose to sing the words in English today, but they're beautiful words, and I think if you take it home and read it over, it just makes a great theological statement that Jesus is our living Lord. As the choir comes down, I want to invite you at this time to share some reflections of Nancy's life, where Pastor Steve and I are going to pass a microphone. Would you like to come up here? Would you be more comfortable, Scott? And you can start us off, and if any of the family wants to speak, and then Steve and I have microphones. We'll be going out into the congregation.
I promise I'll be quick. But first, really thank you to everyone for making the time to join us in our celebration of Nancy, or I called her Mom. For those who traveled long distances to be here today, thank you as well. Cousin Sharon and Catherine from Arizona, Andrea and Casey from Michigan, Aunt Christy also from Michigan, Juanita and Jim also from Michigan, and Aunt Carol from Colorado. And lastly, thank you, Dad, for helping coordinate everything today. And even though you put on this stoic exterior, we know you're hurting inside just like the rest of us. To start off, we Wells are a very private family. And though we lead active social lives in the church and elsewhere, we tend to keep family matters close. So when Mom's condition was finally announced, it was common to hear that friends were shocked. And it's no surprise that I heard comments over the last few days of, "We had no idea, and she never told us." So I wanted to share some details from the last few years, just to add some context to why we're gathered here today. In October 2011, Mom had developed a cough. And initially, seasonal allergies or a cold were suspected. And over the next few weeks, as we spoke on the phone, I could tell the cough lingered and worsened. "Mom, what's going on with this cough?" And "Mom, you should get this looked at." After a few rounds of antibiotics were taken without effect and visits to doctors of narrowing specialization, we learned of the culprit, which was the breast cancer that she had beaten in the late 90s had resurfaced and had metastasized, forming tumors on her lung, liver, and skin. Over the past 2 years, her treatment consisted of 5 different types of chemotherapy and anti-cancer medications, one of which was still in trial with the FDA at the time. And the names of these drugs are now inconsequential. There were trips to UPMC and to St. Clair Hospital. Blood work were shipped to Johns Hopkins Medical Center in Maryland for tumor marker tests, and the results beamed back to Western Pennsylvania. No stone went unturned in the efforts to fight the disease. Over the last few years, Mom remained steadfast in hitting the disease head on. Metastasized breast cancer has a 90% mortality rate, which Mom was aware, and occasionally she needed reaffirmation. There were points where I provided some coaching to her. "Mom, this is a race, and every race begins with a single step." Or, "Mom, remember when I told you this was a race? Well, slow and steady was the race." Or, "Mom, you're winning the race, but once you cross the finish line, you're going to need some help to cross the parking lot and get home." At the end of these conversations, her spirit always picked up. "You're right," she would say, in her mom voice. Her courage and resilience in her fight was unsurpassed. This past April, what would be her last round of treatment, had left remarkably negative side effects. Neuropathy cost her the strength to walk and stand for long periods of time, and the senses of taste and appetite were greatly diminished. For the first time in her life, Mom was forced to slow down, and the things she valued most, her mobility and sampling food, became a challenge. And thus, Mom made the difficult decision to cease treatment and live out her life on her own terms. There were a few victories to celebrate along the way. Metastasized breast cancer often spreads to the brain, and fortunately for Mom, it had not, which meant she would, and did, remain cognizant of her surroundings and hold meaningful conversations and remember those good memories that had blessed her life. Also, she cherished that she was able to live out the twilight of her life from the comfort of her house, surrounded by family and visiting friends, along with those lifetimes of memories, ease the transition from this world into the next. Finally, Mom's decision allowed for time to hold those kinds of conversations that one would only wish were available when death is sudden and unexpected. We were able to say our goodbyes and I love yous. And for that, she was also grateful. Many of you seated here know my mother very well. From her simple background came simple tastes. Her sense of purpose was family first, and that she did with looking after my father, my brother, and I. Between taking care of the household, church, the Lions Club, the Dental Society, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, PTA, band boosters, the Board of Elections, and countless others, there really was no time for activities or hobbies common for many suburban mothers, like beauty and spa treatments, interior decorating, fancy shoes, and clothes shopping. Her sense of selflessness and ability to continue to give when so much was already given was her blessing. And like most mothers, Mom was extremely proud when the family succeeded. Good grades in school, graduations, Jay and Carrie's wedding, Ethan's birth, Father's awards of accomplishments, us boys' various work promotions and new jobs. But above all, she most loved hearing and sharing stories when the close family assembled. A few days prior to Eric and I being married in Michigan, Mom, Dad, JR, Carrie, Erica's mother Juanita, Jim, Andrea, and Casey, we were to gather around a table, old and new family, and countless story upon story were passed back and forth. For the first time, Mom heard of such escapades of adolescent hijinks involving the family faux wood paneled Buick Roadmaster station wagon that on a summer Saturday evening had a vacuum cleaner tied to the back bumper and was driven through neighborhoods a few towns over to determine if one could successfully whip said vacuum cleaner around a mailbox post, or of late-night drives on I-79 to determine the top speed a 5.7-liter V8 would provide. Upon hearing these stories, Mom responded with her trademark phrases of, "Aha!" and "So now it comes out," in only Mom's voice. And these answered such long, unanswered questions of, why is the alignment on the car always out of whack? And replace the brakes. Well, we just replaced the brakes. And these stories were followed shortly by the deepest of smiles on Mom's face. And one could tell that she was at her happiest, surrounded by her family that meant so much to her. I know, Ethan. And here we are gathered to surround her one last time to honor her memory. And though we are sad and hurting because she is already missed, we know she's in a better place, one without discomfort and pain. To the best mother a son could ever ask for, I love you, Mom. With all my heart, may you be at peace.
Thank you, Scott. Anybody else from the family, or shall we pass the mic? JR? Do you want to go up, or do you just
want to... Who here has gotten a call from Nancy Wells on the phone? You might remember her voice when she calls you. She was all business, but friendly. I was talking to Jan Bazzelli yesterday, and a word came to mind that would describe Mom, and I think that word is authentic. Mom was authentic. She was who she was, and she let that shine through. There was no pretending. And, that would allow us to be silly sometimes, like around the dinner table. Scott was sharing some funny memories. Well, we would have a lot of funny stories around the dinner table, Dad and Scott and I, and we would crack Mom up, and she would smile. She loved that so much. We were always around the dinner table. We were always eating. Always eating. Until we eat again is one thing my mom would always say, and you might have heard it a few times. Food was so important to her, so important to our lives, together and with friends. I think she knew something about the fellowship around the table, fellowship of food. Our Lord Jesus kicked that off when he fed 3,000 people, and Mom just continued along. Nutrition was important to her. I had a friend in high school who was a meat and potatoes guy. He came over to visit, and Mom really wanted him to eat fruit in the worst way. Ended up bribing him with Oreo cookies, I think. And I think we were up to 16 Oreo cookies for one plum. Well, it just really hurt Mom when she couldn't enjoy food the way that she used to. I think that was the hardest thing when she said she didn't have an appetite. She didn't want to eat. And she knew that she wasn't going to be able to enjoy doing the things that she enjoyed doing with Dad, going out to eat at restaurants. She could watch the Food Network. I watched that a lot. But that was sad. But now I'm comforted to know that she's with our Lord right now, and she's probably baking a lasagna and getting things ready for when we join her. So, in honor of her memory and in honor of the fellowship that she felt was so important and dear, and bringing folks close to one another and sharing her faith in Jesus, why don't you consider having some people over? Bring some friends to the house and cook a meal and get to know them a little bit better. Mom would love that.
Is there anybody out here who would like to say something about Nancy? It doesn't have to be as eloquent as these two. Tough act to follow, but just a few words. Raise your hand. I can bring a mic. Pastor Steve can grab a mic too. Anybody? No? Thank you.
Hi. I feel very blessed having been in the periphery of Nancy and Jay and the boys. I've known them for some time, and we were always raising kids and doing scouting together, and then I got sick with lymphoma, and it would be surprise, there's Nancy at the door with dinner, and she's definitely going to be missed. So, thank you.
Anybody else? Yep. Let me go. Steve's got that way. I'll get this way. Go ahead. Go, Billy.
Mrs. Wells was one of a slew of mothers who helped try to control us when we were kids, running around these very halls, and had a hand in actually raising us. And I was fortunate enough many years, decades later, to get to know her again as an adult. And there was always a genuine concern with what was going on in your life, even if you were living in another city. She knew what was going on with a job or a life or a move, and was fully informed and would track you down after service and ask you how it was going. And the concern or the enthusiasm, the joy with whatever was happening, at least in my life, was genuine and heartfelt. And she would find you, give you that big hug, and it's just testimony to her selflessness and her genuine love for other people.
Thank you, Linda. Being a choir member, I remember very well when Nancy would be there. She always had this wonderful smile on her face. And again, she wanted to know about you and your family, and she did know. She inquired. She just had that general concern, that general love that she wanted to convey, and know that you were important, your family was important. And you just got a wonderful feeling from what she did. It was, not a long conversation, but it was a caring conversation. And I think that's what she was about.
Is there somebody else over here? Oh, right.
Jay and I and Nancy go back probably 50-some years. Jay was my scoutmaster, and when I was here as a young man. If you were to summarize the characteristic of an individual like Nancy, there's one word that comes to mind for me, and that is caring. Nancy was selfish. She always wanted to know how you were rather than herself. When Nancy was first diagnosed, my mother was also involved with hospital care. And I had to come and visit her, and I came over to see Nancy and Jay while she was in the hospital. And she never once talked about herself. It was always about how you were, how was your mother, how things like that. And that's one of the strongest characteristics I'll take with me as I remember Nancy.
Anybody else? Yep. Over there. Okay.
Jay, Bob and I are so sorry for your loss. Nancy was a loyal friend. She was a very attentive listener. She was a mentor. She was very compassionate. I always felt stronger and more hopeful from being with her. We will really miss her warmth and her smile. We love you and the family, Jay.
I saw another hand way in the back over there.
My name's Denny Charlton. I knew Nancy from dental meetings. I probably only saw Nancy 25 or 30 times in my entire life, but she was a good friend. I would see her across the room. We would make eye contact. It was always a warm welcome. And as everyone says, she was authentic, she was caring, she was a good listener. She always knew to ask about my children and where they were and what they were doing, and she was just a really special lady. I actually knew Jay before I knew Nancy, and I always respected him quite a bit. But knowing Nancy later, I realized that the old saying that behind every successful man is a great woman, it's very true.
Okay, I saw another one way back there. Pastor Steve's heading over there, and then I'll come up front. I see some in the front row.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about Nancy. I went to high school with Nancy, and I just can't say enough about the years, those adolescent years we had together. It was such amazing. She was very encouraging. She listened to everything we had to say. I mean, no matter how bad or good and what things were happening to us, she was always there for us. And I remember having a nice dinner with her parents at her home in Mount Oliver. And just the whole atmosphere, everything around her was just very loving. And I will miss her. For years, we were both busy with our own lives, but I have such fond memories of her. And my class of 1963, if you talk to people in the class, they do too. And we loved her, and she was such a great, good woman. So thank you for this opportunity to say that.
I saw some in the front row. Christy.
My heart goes out especially to JR and Scott and the loss of their mother. I think the last time Carol and I were in this church was for the funeral service of our mom, Jay's mom. And Nancy was such a caregiver to our mom. With Jay traveling a lot and Carol in Colorado and me in Michigan, we could not help much when our mother needed help. And Nancy was there. And Mother so appreciated her help when it came to doctor's appointments or when she was in the hospital and then in rehab. It was Nancy picking up laundry and making sure she had everything she needed. She was such a caregiver herself. And I'm so grateful to all the people that cared for Nancy when she needed help because, again, we were not able to help her like we could if we were here. But anyhow, Mother, if she were here, would say thank you, Nancy, and we all love you so much.
Anyone else? Nope. Steve, okay.
My husband and I moved next door to Jay and Nancy 10 years ago, and you couldn't have met better people. But I wanted to talk about the food. One time, we share a small, part of grass in the front yard, and one time, Jack would cut it. And about 2 hours later, we got called, I'm coming over. Well, first comes the first of many, many times of chocolate chip cookies. And then another time I would get a phone call, don't make dinner. Now, I already have dinner on, but we would then put what I made away or in the freezer because Nancy was coming. But first she wanted to know what kind of salad dressing we wanted. I mean, who cares? She's bringing dinner. But, not only did she bring salad, and we used our own dressing, but bread, a big plate of either lasagna or chicken pot pies, which Jack loved, dessert, 2 kinds of dessert, because it was sorbet, just in case we didn't like either one. She had everything covered. And this went on constantly, and she was such a good cook. I was partial to the cookies, I have to say that. But Nancy and I became very good friends. We could talk about anything that girlfriends talk about, whether it was husbands, kids, whatever was going on. Sometimes we'd complain, sometimes we, would sing their praises, but I could talk to her like my best friend, and I will greatly miss her. Now, one thing, though, that my husband and I always laughed about, if you would do, Nancy did something for you and you said thank you, she didn't want that thank you. She said, it was nothing. But if you did the littlest thing from her, we used to get a call that said thank you, we would get an email that said thank you, and a card that said thank you. So we used to laugh if we were going to do something. How many thank yous were we going to get? So Nancy was just a loving person, and I truly am going to miss her.